Well, until recently, the majority of migrants were arriving off the coast of Italy. Well, Pasquale Terracciano is the Italian ambassador here to the UK. Welcome here to today's Global. Thanks so much for being with us. Your Prime Minister, you yourself have talked about the need for a common approach to this crisis. Are we finally, after weeks and months of chaos, edging towards a more common approach, do you think?
I think we are. But it's also a pity that Europe needs every time a crisis to get its acts together. I think that the problem is tragic, but it's manageable. It's manageable only through a common approach, common policies for managing European borders, common policy for asylum. We need a European asylum with homogeneous criteria. For 28 countries. We need a common approach to return to their countries those who do not qualify for asylum.
You said we were edging towards a common approach, and yet today we've seen the UK announce a plan totally separate to the EU plan. They're not going to be part of EU proposals on quotas. We've also seen the Hungarian Prime Minister again rubbish any sort of talk about quotas as being simply unworkable. That doesn't sound like we've quite got there in terms of a common approach.
Well, I think that what has changed is that through this crisis, now there is a movement pushed from the public opinion that's shifting government's position. So I'm rather optimistic, and I think it's quite clear to everybody that this policy of beggar thy neighbor leads nowhere. I mean, have we solved anything just blaming each other or trying to shift the burden on the others? But isn't the Hungarian
Prime Minister right? He said, there is no point about talking about numbers if you don't actually secure the outer borders of the EU, because if you're talking about 160,000 people to be divided up amongst the EU nations now, in a month's time, if you don't sort out the root cause, you've got another 100,000 you have to deal with. So he's right, is he not?
No, I don't think that he is right, because with all due respect, I believe that you need a comprehensive approach. You can't say, for example, to Italy, well, just you have to identify all those who arrive there, no matter what numbers you have to deal with, and then you have to keep them there. I mean, you can't ask us to be the prison wardens of Europe. So you need a comprehensive approach where there is a common effort to identify, shelter them, then to distribute them and to return those who do not
is the critical point that you can't get agreement on within the EU, because what happens, I mean, there are talks of national quotas and numbers are flying around with what each country is likely to be expected to take. What if countries like Hungary, Slovakia, the Czech Republic simply say no?
Well, the Commission has proposed alternative measures. They could pay their contribution in financial terms, although, of course, this is not...
pay in to opt out?
Something of the kind. It's not the ideal solution, but could at least guarantee an agreement on a common policy.
And those countries, I mean, I was looking at some of the proposals. Poland at the moment say they think they could probably cope with taking about 2,000. It is said that they'll be asked to take 12,000. I mean, is it fair on the poorer countries to ask them to take those sorts of figures, those sorts of amounts?
Well, I think it's, if you want to be in Europe, you have to be up to European values. So you have to, if there is a problem, you have to take your own fair share to solve that problem. And referring, well, you could say then
it's not an ability to cope, it's about fundamental values, is it? So when the Slovakian politicians talk about only wanting Christians, does that betray the values that the EU has been built on, in your view?
I think so. I think that European is secular, is of course founded on Christian roots, but it's a secular creation, and so you cannot discriminate on the basis of sex, religion, or race.
And yet they are. But they said it again today in the last hour.
I think that I don't know if they will be able to keep this position if there is a very strong public opinion movement. Anyway, you can accommodate. It's regretful, but if they do not block the common decision, you can also accommodate those minority views.
But if all of these countries say no, and they're allowed to say no, where do those extra numbers end up going? Is this just a problem that's shoveled off to Germany?
But you will have compensation, financial compensation, and maybe the fact that you have to pay then would turn public opinion. Maybe public opinion would say, well, I think I can cope with 10,000 people and I prefer to get the money for something else.
What is in this plan to actually solve the root cause of the problem? Because if you were sitting there in Afghanistan or the north of Africa, watching what is happening at the moment, you may well think, do you know what, I'll go and have a shot at trying to settle in Germany or France or elsewhere.
I think we have to distinguish.
What are you doing or plan to do to solve the actual problem?
You have to distinguish two root causes. One is the cause at the basis of movement of refugees. There, of course, you have to pacify Syria, you have to stabilize Libya, but it's a long-term task. In the meantime, I think you have to be up to your values and receive those refugees. The other root cause, which is at the basis of economic migration, economic migrants, there, the way to solve it is, of course, have better focused development aid, but at the same time, there's a lot of talking of pull factor.
But will all of these things be in the plan that's announced in the coming days from EU leaders?
Hopefully, yes. But what you need is a policy to return asylum, well, those who do not get asylum, back to their countries. And this has a very strong disincentivating effect. So you see people coming back and you realize that there's no point in giving your money to traffickers to try to get to Europe, because you are returned back.
So you think it still can be solved? Just a final sentence, because we're out of time. You don't think we've reached the point now that this wave of people is unstoppable?
No. What you cannot stop, I think, and you shouldn't stop, is the flow of people from war, refugees, authentic refugees. The other flow, it can be stemmed with better development aid policies and with a truly European policy for returns.
All right. Ambassador, thank you so much for coming in to talk to us.